Hello and welcome once again to my channel Reflections. This time I want to show you how to identify the symptoms of spiritual desolation. When I say desolation, I want to describe a human experience that is very unpleasant and that we all live. Actually, for a good discernment, it's very important to identify these kind of symptoms. Desolation, then, is that inner anguish that makes us feel abandoned or perhaps feeling that our hearts are afflicted. The spiritual desolation is the heaviness of the heart that happens on a spiritual level. It is that slope that lowers our spirits and strength. It is a state of the soul that somehow takes away our energy and attention. I could say that this state, in a way, I think, is allowed by God in order to help us to pay attention about the essential things in our life. Perhaps to take care of things that we have neglected before. Therefore, that will help us to enrich our life of faith. When we are in this state of desolation and we consent to let ourselves be carried away by this sensation and driven as well by this sensation, it will always lead us little by little to fall into sin that actually is being away of God. We could say then that is part of an undulating dynamic of the interior life of the human being, with ups and downs, consolation and desolation, and so forth. Always after a desolation comes a consolation, and so. And if we know how to navigate and take advantage of these states, that divine light that comes from God will help us to get a lesson always from that desolation. Depression is not properly, when some people ask me about, it's not properly desolation. It is rather a psychological state to which desolation actually is usually part of that experience of depression. Desolation, as I said before, is the experience of being away from God. It does not have a certain time usually. It can last a second, few minutes, days, or weeks. St. Ignatius has good tips actually along his rules when he said, for instance, in a time of desolation, never make a change. Because obviously, any important decision that we want to make during the desolation will be wrong. So desolation is a spiritual state, as I said. But it is not a sin, and it is not a temptation either. It is rather like being on a downhill slope, rolling down. Imagine that the ground under your feet somehow suddenly rises up. And because of that, naturally, you will start rolling down. It's kind of like that. Now, during that experience of falling down the slope, we see that there is an enemy. And we find that enemy on the way down. And he's going to take action to attack us. He knows that when we fall down, we are very vulnerable as well. So St. Ignatius, in his rules, when he used the word enemy, he referred to three dimensions or characters that come together in order to attack us. The first is the devil or Satan, that fallen angel that is stalking us constantly. The second is the old man or old woman, as St. Paul says, who are those bad and old habits that we carry along the time in our life. Finally, the third is the negative world, the world that is around us. But it's the world where we find gossip, hypocrisy, sexual disorders, and so forth, and many other things that actually take us away from God. This slope of desolation, we also can explain it as something that takes us away our peace, our inner peace, and actually transform it in something similar, but it's not really the peace that we are longing. It's actually an appearance of peace. It's like a calm before the storm, and it's actually a blind calm, that we cannot see what is coming. In short, it is the experience and the sensation of the absence of God's action. And I say the experience and the feeling because God is always present, always with us. Nonetheless, we can't see Him because we're falling down the slope and feeling this unpleasant dynamic. That's why it's so difficult to see Him. And it's also difficult for us to see Him because the spiritual desolation takes us to the darkness of the soul. Therefore, things become blurred and all clarity is lost. For example, when I don't feel anything, when things lose certainty and then I become less motivated and my feelings are disoriented. Then our head looks for answers and also for meanings, obviously, because somehow we feel a deep void spreading out in our heart. For this reason, if we let ourselves be carried and driven, by our feelings and by those desperate, sensations, that is all desolation, we'll settle for any answer, and most likely with the least adequate. This definitely happens to all of us, from the holiest person to the most sinful, to all of us. But yes, always remember that it is possible to get positive benefits from spiritual desolation. Yeah, we can navigate through these waters and have success. But I will explain all this wisdom actually in later videos. As I said at the beginning, this spiritual desolation has many angles and manifestations. Therefore, I want to stop right here with this reflection because I don't want to feel dizzy or I'm giving to you a lot of information that you need to process and to think about. So think about these symptoms that I have described already and take a look if you can actually awake and be aware of what's going on in you. So I hope you enjoyed this video, this first reflection of many more around the spiritual desolation, and God may bless you very much, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.